But when I meet these mentors, what I want from them is someone who is honest, transparent, and is truly wanting to uplift. And I say that because there's so many people who say that, women uplifting women and blah, 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 but they're not actually girls, because when they start to see you do better than them, that's when they retreat. And
you're just mean girls with lipstick.
Exactly. And I don't want that. And I'm so good at seeing those girls because I was bullied by those girls in junior high. And so I think that's what has caused me to understand, I don't know. I mean, I'll give you a little bit of a chance, but my mentors right now are those true supporters. And I don't even like saying girls, because I think that already is you just have to support them because they're a woman. No, you don't have to support me just because we're both females. I want you to support me because you believe that you believe in what I'm doing, and I would do the same for you.
Welcome to NICU Heroes, a podcast produced exclusively for NICU professionals, with me, Kathryn Whitaker, as your host. I'm the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit dedicated to providing free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a baby's NICU stay. As a NICU professional, you've been well trained to care for the tiniest and the sickest babies every day. While a NICU parent's scars are not as visible, those parents are often as fragile as their babies, requiring patience, guidance, and encouragement to ensure that they are mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared to endure the pressure of a NICU stay. NICU Heroes is dedicated to helping NICU professionals like you better understand, support, and nurture the entire NICU family. Howdy, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast for 2026. So, NICU Heroes is always a joy because once a month we get to bring specialists in so many different areas to your listening ears. You get CEUs for those, so it's bonus. You get to learn, but you also get credit. And I'm excited that we get to kick it off this year with one of my favorite guests. So she was actually a guest over on our sister podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support. I found Dr. Mona. She was one of the doctors that I started following during the pandemic, and she has stayed the course because I really appreciate her vulnerability, but also the things and the ways in which she challenges me to think differently, to maybe empathize with maybe people that I may not be familiar with, or situations that maybe I may not have had experience with. And I think that her topic today, we're really focusing on women in medicine. While she's a pediatrician, we absolutely talk about NICU professionals in this particular podcast episode, but we give a voice to what does it look like to be in a system that maybe wasn't built for you? And how do you overcome burnout? How do you find great mentors? She has some excellent advice on that. So I'm really excited to invite my friend back, Dr. Mona, for a really great conversation. I hope that you absolutely love it. Dr. Mona Amin is my guest today. She's a board-certified general pediatrician, an IBCLC, an online parenting educator, and a mom. She's been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, Good Morning America, Parents.com, and ABC Nightly News. Through her brand, Pedsdoctalk, her goal is to provide relatable and easy to digest guidance for the modern parent regarding child health, development, and parenting. Her work emphasizes the importance of early childhood development and the lifelong impact of healthy sleep habits, a positive relationship with food, and emotional well-being, starting in early childhood and continuing throughout life. She is a fantastic guest, so strap in, get your AirPods in, and listen to a really great episode for this month of NICU Heroes. Well, I'm super excited because I know that NICU Heroes has not heard your name yet, but I've heard your name because we had you on our sister podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support. But Dr. Amin, thanks for coming back to the podcast.
So happy to be here. I love the other conversation. I know this one's going to be great as well. So thank you for having me.
Well, you were really easy to talk to, and we were just talking before I hit record that you're an open book, which is what I was hoping for. You're our very first episode of 2026. So I know that I asked this last time, but I was really struck by your answer as to how you were introduced to medicine. So while I like for people to know the receipt part, I would love for you to share with listeners that really beautiful way that you sort of entered into learning to love medicine.
Yeah, I grew up with world being my oyster in terms of parents, and especially a mother who's very, in tune with what I wanted to do. They always wanted me to have a secure field. Like, they're immigrants themselves. So in their eyes, they wanted me and my sister to have a career that would be able to provide for us. So that really did mean medicine, law, business, pharmacy, as many of my South Asian listeners probably can relate to. But within that, even though they wanted me to do that, my mom was in the healthcare field and I would volunteer at her hospital. She was a phlebotomist lab tech. So she would do blood work and I would volunteer there every summer. And I loved it. I just loved being in the healthcare system. Her colleagues that worked with her were just so welcoming. And I just really loved my doctor growing up. So I had a family medicine doctor who was also an osteopathic physician like myself. And I have so many vivid memories of just going to his visits and just feeling so supported. I loved his style. I loved that I was a student athlete. So, I had to go every year for sports physicals. And I just felt like he empowered me. He called me out on the germing things that I used to do that would cause me to get sick all the time, like biting my nails in the nicest but matter of fact way possible, right? Like, Mona, if you don't want to get sick all the time, stop biting your nails and stop coming into my office. And I'm like, you're right, Dr. Longnecker, that was his name. I need to stop biting my nails. And so it was just such an amazing relationship. And I knew that medicine was a secure field, but also I just found so much joy in it. And especially in pediatrics, I just had found through my education that I loved being able to go upstream, right, to the foundation of what we're doing with raising kids, creating a healthy foundation of sleep, feeding, emotions, self-worth, all start so young. And I just feel like I get this amazing opportunity to use my love for medicine and then also bridge it with parenting and psychology, which are my passions, to be this pediatrician that really speaks to child health, mind, body, and spirit, which is really that osteopathic medicine philosophy that I get to put in life every day, which is so cool and honestly so rewarding.
Well, it makes sense that because you had such good mentors that now you get to give some of that back today. I know not directly, but people that are listening, I think, will appreciate the importance of having good mentors in their lives. So
Yes.
maybe what they hear today may encourage them to say, like, you know what, I've been meaning to connect with that person. I've been meaning to build a relationship there because I think that they may help me be able to do what it is that I want to do. So I think it's really important to develop good mentorship because we don't
Yeah.
we don't we don't succeed on our own. We succeed with a group of people. And so I'm grateful that you mentioned that. Okay, so for people that don't know, you do have a really amazing social media platform, but some people don't necessarily know the whole backstory. So give us a little bit of an idea of where you started in medicine and then where
Yeah.
you are now.
Yeah. So at the time of this recording, I have been practicing for 10 and a half years outside of residency. So residency is pediatric residency for 3 years, 10 and a half of clinical medicine, which boggles my mind because, I look 30 years old. Just kidding.
You do. No,
Yeah.
you 100% do.
I'm just kidding. Skincare routine. No.
Yeah.
And melanin helps a lot. Okay. But I started outpatient. I never knew that social media was even a thing to educate online as social media, like a social media educator as a physician. That wasn't a thing in residency. So my vision was I wanted to do outpatient.
Not a class in residency?
Yeah, not a class. I mean, now we need to do it because there's so much avenue there. And I just started, I started knowing that I wanted to do outpatient medicine. I was a general pediatrician and about 4 years out. So I had worked in New York City for 2 years and then me and my husband relocated pre-children, pre-dog to Florida. And after 2 years of being in Florida, I was so burnt out. And so now this is 4 years post-residency. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, how am I going to sustain a career, pay off our loans, and find peace in this when I'm already burnt out? And I was sad. Like I was really burnt out. And I started creating on social media as a way to reclaim my burnout. So people often think like, well, why would you want to do more when you're already burnt out? But what it felt like was when I went online and started educating, I was able to say the things I wanted to say. I was able to have a resemblance of control over the education I wasn't able to do in the office due to time constraints, due to someone always knocking on my door saying, hey, someone's angry that they're waiting, which is not in my control. It's the schedulers and how they overpack our schedules. And it just felt like I was able to reclaim this part of my love for medicine and pediatrics. And then through that, came opportunity, right? Through that came a platform that continued to grow. The pandemic brought so many more followers to my community because people were going online for all of this information. And really, it has just been this perfect storm and kismet of like the timing of wanting to get online, having such a passion for it, and really wanting to educate people and parents outside of the confines of an office. And it, to this day, like, I don't know if this is ever going to fade away. I hold so much gratitude for my platform. You know, every little thing is still big for me, right? Whether I had 1,000 followers or approaching 2 million followers, like, the gratitude is always there, because I've been able to build this from scratch. And because I get to do what I do on my own terms has been just so liberating.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have so many follow-up questions. Okay, so let's start with this one is women in medicine. So I know that you
Mhm.
mentioned kind of during the pandemic is when I started following some really I felt like they had solid receipts, but they were also well-educated women in
Yeah.
medicine. And that felt like a little bit of an anomaly because many of the doctors that we had in our NICU baby's life and in my life were men. No shade
Yeah.
against the men, but it was
Right.
really great to see women in medicine. So let's dive into that a little bit. Do you feel like we do a good job of encouraging women in medicine and then finding good support? And if not, what can we do better?
Yeah, so I think this has really evolved, and I think I want to be clear that I think the medical system is still has a lot of patriarchy to it. You know, when I was in training, there was just a lot of like, you know, I'm in pediatrics, but it just had felt in the training and in the process that there wasn't a lot of acceptance for women. And how I can say that? No maternity leave in residency, right? No understanding of the family unit, right? Like the lack of maternity leave, the lack of understanding of, you know, women's needs, fertility issues. Those aren't really talked about because it's a very patriarchal society. It's a patriarchal establishment. And so through my training and through the experience, I've seen those narratives continue to change. And that's largely due to women in medicine becoming higher roles in corporations, in
Right.
businesses, owning their own businesses. And that's how it changes. Unfortunately, I felt like this firsthand. The men don't really the men still didn't care about us. The only men that really cared about me and all the things that I was going through as a female in medicine, mom, fertility issues, birth trauma, was a gay man and the women that were helping figure out my schedule, figure out everything else. But I dealt with so much patriarchy and so much, well, you're just going to do this because that's what you have to do, even when I was an attending at my old job. And it was so frustrating because, you know, if I could tell all the stories, it would probably not be
Oh,
great. But it really, when you reflect back on it, you're like, wow, this could have been such a different experience had you
yeah.
just understood that what I was asking for was a place to pump my for breast milk, was an adjustment in my schedule because I was 9 months pregnant and my blood pressure was creeping up and my doctor was thinking that I probably should adjust my schedule. And there was a lot of no's. And so I think it's gotten better. But what we need to continue doing is having women in leadership that understand that they want to improve what wasn't done for them. And what I mean by that is that there also is some degree of mean girl mentality in the older generation of women. And I saw that from a colleague where I didn't get that. I had to figure out how to pump between patients. I didn't get any leave, so why should you? That is not how we move things forward. We move things forward by saying to ourselves, this didn't work for me. I didn't get paid leave. I didn't get any leave. How can I make this better? And an example I do is in my old job, I had residents and I get a little emotional, but I had residents and I went through, you know, pregnancies that were not very difficult, but difficult to some degree, and postpartum experiences that were very tough. And I think we talked about that on the other conversation. And there was a resident, and I know how it is to be in residency. And I also know, because of the way residency is set up, how hard it must be to be pregnant in residency because of the need to show up. The fact that if you're sick, you got to make up that time, like those hours. You don't get sick days in residency. And she showed up to clinic, one of my residents, and she wasn't feeling good. And I said, you're going to go home. And you're going to go home. I'm going to see your patients for you. And you're going to get some rest. And she literally bawled. And she's like, Dr. Mona, like, you teach me so much, but you also just show me so much compassion. And I know that she's a hard worker. I know that if she could, she would. But we have to be understanding of being a woman in medicine. And the reality is that we're going to get pregnant. We may have to go through IVF. We may have to do surrogacy. We may need to attend visits, you know, at doctors' offices. And also, we still take the brunt of the parenting load. Even if we are women in medicine married to an amazing man, it's just what happens to so many women. And that's just not in medicine only, but it's understanding that. And I think if more healthcare institutions, hospitals, clinics understood that by supporting women, by letting them block their schedules so that they can go pick up their kid at 3:45 or attend a holiday event, if they could just do that, the retention would be better. We wouldn't see women in medicine leaving practices or starting their own thing, or like myself, wanting to find something better because I wasn't treated with the basic respect for being a woman and a mom that I think every woman deserves, whether they're a mom or not. And so that is how we change things for the better. And I see it happening, but it could be far better in my opinion.
Well, it's almost like the thing that you fear, like, oh, if we give them latitude on this, then we sort of ease the reins. But instead, when you give them latitude, you actually build more trust, which means that
Yes.
you build more allegiance. So, and it makes everyone better. So I think our natural instinct is like, oh, but if we cut them some slack, everything's gonna fall apart. When actually it wouldn't do that.
They're
Um,
not we're not toddlers, right? It's not like we're gonna just
right.
like I joke with my husband, like we're grown women. And I now, I have peds and I have 4 employees, part of peds that help me with various in various capacities. And when I started hiring people, my dream was to give them what I did not get in my corporate medicine practice, which is unlimited sick days, unlimited vacation days. And funny enough, they work so freaking hard. Even when one of my employees is pregnant and I was like, hey, I'm a small business. So I give 8 weeks paid, 4 weeks unpaid. So 12 weeks maternity leave. I was like, I'm going to give you 8 weeks paid. She's like, I'm probably going to come back at 6 weeks. I'm like, why? Like, I'm giving you
Don't do that.
8 weeks paid. Like, take it. And she's like, I'm going to be so bored. And I'm like, this is her 3rd kid. Like, I'm going to need something to do, like just to get that. And I'm like, listen, you're so funny, but like, that is the kind of work ethic that we've created because they know that I have their back. They know that if they
Yeah.
need to pause work and go take care of their kid or take them to the hospital, that we're going to make it work as a team. And they work so much harder. And that is what I believe that every mom and woman would do if they had the opportunity. And this goes for men too, but like we do take a lot of that burden. And just another point is that women tend to be in a lot of these caretaking fields, right? We tend to be teachers. We tend to be psychologists. We tend to be doctors, nurses, nurturers. And the nurturers are burning out because not only now are they not being treated with any sort of basic respect that we should be getting in the workplace, many of those nurturers are now becoming parents and are feeling that burden of like, where am I going to be taken care of? Like, I don't need a red carpet, but I just need someone to understand that I need a little bit of flexibility here to be able to do my job. And if you're a parent, to better show up for my children. And that is why I see so many women in medicine suffer when they become parents, in that this torn dichotomy of like, what about this? And what about this? And where do I land? And how can I be what I want to be in both worlds when I feel useless in both sometimes? And it's a really hard feeling.
I want to talk about burnout in a second, but before we do, I
Yeah.
feel like we need to address this because I know we talked about women in medicine, but I want to specifically talk about women of color in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We have been blessed. Our pediatrician is a woman of color. She is amazing. And I keep telling her, Dr. Enders, you are like the gold standard for me because she's not only a champion for us and our family, but she is a massive champion for other women of color in medicine. And so I know that there has to be bias, there have to be things that you came up against. Dr. Mona, what were some of the things, like maybe to tell me a couple of things that were big barriers, and then maybe a couple of ways that you moved past those or found support so that you could get past those?
I'll have to say, being Indian American, I think because there was such a large Indian American population that goes into medicine, right? Like it's not like being African American Black, right? I mean, I think being a minority, I'm the least affected minority when it comes to medicine when you're looking at minorities in general, just because of how many Indian people are in medicine. So I would say that I didn't face a lot of bias. Obviously, when it came to jobs, my husband and I both were passed up for jobs for people who were of the same race, religion as the higher ups. And that was very jarring to us because we had worked just as hard. And we did notice that there was a little bit of bias. There's a little bit of nepotism that exists in medicine too. People don't realize that. And so that was hard to see. You know, when you work just as hard or even harder, you're applying for a senior position. And that's the bias you got. What I actually felt the most bias about, interestingly, was being a DO. And I never thought that being an osteopathic physician would lend me to be, you know, have that sort of feeling. But I had gone on interviews and they knew that I was a DO. They had it on their application. And I remember going to an interview and we hit it off so well. Like, this was my dream job where I would be seeing patients, teaching residents in New York, like 20-minute drive from where my husband and I would be living. And they ghosted me after the interview. And I called the recruiter and I was like, what's going on? And she said, oh, they loved you, but then they realized that you are a DO and they only want MDs. And I was like, wow, I was so hurt. And I was, you know, this is when you're just fresh out of residency, trying to find a job. You have this big amount of debt looming over you and you just want a good quality job. And it was devastating. But through that experience, another door opened that turned out to be a better fit for me. And like, fast forward 10 years later, I was working in practice, teaching residents, started my own social media handle. So it's like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't meant to be. And so that is the bias that I saw, DO bias. And then, you know, just a little bit of favoritism based on religion or, you know, I'm going to be quite frank. There's a lot of Jewish people in medicine. And if you're not Jewish, you got passed up a lot. And so it was very unfortunate when we were in New York, we saw that happen a lot. And that is a reality in a lot of specialties and in a lot of different careers, I'm sure. But we found it to be very prominent in medicine in our experiences when we were in New York. And right now here, we weren't really trying to climb the totem pole of any kind to see if in Florida there was any issue. But it was something that we both recognized as a concern and something that made us feel a little bit sad that working so hard that we were passed up for opportunity.
Yeah, I think I would like to say that your situation's unique, but I don't think that it is.
I know.
And it's not unique, I don't think, in any specific field, but I think it does. I think the more that we talk about it, the less we can sort of sweep it under the rug and the more that we have to bring it to the forefront and actually deal with it. You mentioned that when y'all lived in Florida, that when you moved there, that's when you started to realize, okay, I'm feeling burned out and I'm only 4.5 years post residency. Dr. Mona, maybe give us an idea of like, how did you know you were burned out? Because sometimes you'll say, oh, I'm burned out, but what did that really look like for you?
Yeah, and I know burnout can look so different for different people, but my burnout characteristic is irritability, snapping, and just being uncomfortable in my own body. Like I just felt tense and my heart rate would be high and I just was cranky. And, you know, one of the biggest things is I had a dog. We had just got a puppy maybe a few months after arriving to Florida. We were in these very stressful jobs and I would get so frustrated with him. And I'm like, why am I getting frustrated with a little dog? Like, it's not the dog. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like when you have kids and you're frustrated overly, you're like, okay, yes, they can be hard. And like, I'm not denying that, you know, having to train a puppy or having children is not like just a walk in the park. But there was something happening where I just was not a happy person. And my husband saw it. I felt it. And another big tell sign is I would just get really bad anxiety when I walked in through those doors of my office. I was looking for any way to escape. You know, when I started to get really burned out, I didn't want to spend that extra 10 minutes with a family. I wanted to get out. I wanted to go to lunch. I wanted to escape. Whereas now, I'm working like 70 to 80 hours a week and I could do what I'm doing now all day, every day, if I could, just because I'm not burnt out. And so it just went into showing like the body can tell you what is happening, your feeling when you walk into a place and your desire to just not want to be there, you know, or your desire to have that sort of moral injury and moral fatigue. And I would just be like, I didn't care as much. And when you stop caring as much as a pediatrician or as a clinician, that's a huge problem, right? Because our job is a caring job. And so that was a primer of like, how do I bring my care back? How do I bring this love back to make me feel like I want to have these discussions, even when the systems around me are not always supportive?
So that's about the time that you started social media, what were some other things, Dr. Mona, that you were like, okay, so if these are the things that are causing burnout, and I still love the profession, but these are the things that I don't love. How did you figure out what to do to alleviate the burnout in those specific areas so that you could find that passion again?
So for me, interestingly, like when I created the social handle, I didn't think that the social handle would turn into anything that would give me opportunity, because I didn't know the potential of a social media handle being an educator. No one ever taught me that. And I was like, I saw other people do it and I was like, I want to do it. And full transparency, I even talked to other doctors who were on the platforms like Instagram. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about joining just to do education predominant content. And I remember a few of them were like, no one really wants that. Like, you want lifestyle, or like, but I'm not a lifestyle person. Like, I don't want to share my clothes and my makeup routine and all this stuff. Like, that's not me. And so then I said, I'm just going to do it. And as I started building, that first thing was, I knew that I was not feeling as burnt out, having that time and space to like do this side hustle and do this side thing that brought me joy, right? Like, in my profession that I love, being able to go online and educate and respond to people's questions made me feel like I was a good doctor again. Like, made me feel like I wasn't this burnt out, awful doctor that people were getting in the office, because I had time. I didn't have kids at that moment. So like, I would go home, respond to comments. My husband and I would just be sitting on the couch, and like, I just felt like people could get more help. And I just felt like I was doing my job better. And by turn, I was happier at my office again, because I just felt like, okay, I have this secret thing that I get to go home and like enjoy. And then as the platform grew and I got brand partnerships or speaking engagements or any opportunity, then that's when, I started to click. Like, I'm like, like, how can I make this something that I could maybe cut down my hours? Because I knew that I didn't want to step away from clinical medicine altogether, because I liked seeing patients, but I was in a system and a practice that was just so busy and toxic. So then as PedsDoctalk grew, I cut down my hours at my clinical job. So I was able to create this sort of system of a schedule that made it where I could still have time for PedsDoctalk, which brought me a lot of joy because it was under my control and I got to control the topics and the activities that I was doing. But I was still in this world of patient-facing medicine. And then it continued to go down. And I was at a practice, thankfully, that had options to reduce. And so that is when I sort of realized, okay, I'm finding now that I'm happy more because I'm stepping away. And when I finally completely stepped away from the practice is when my mental health really surged. Like, I'm the happiest I've ever been because I'm not in a system that just felt so toxic for so long. And I didn't even realize it until I fully stepped away at the end of last year. And like, for the last few months, I've been in a new role that I'm like, now I feel it. Now I feel what it feels to be not burnt out in medicine, because I'm calling the shots. I'm feeling supported. I'm feeling like my voice matters. And that is what I think most people want in any job. Not, again, a red carpet of like, you need this and you need this. I just want a freaking thank you. I just want like hey, you're doing hard work, but it's become so metric focused and so, so much less of like quality. And we see that as clinicians, and so hard.
So you felt appreciated.
Yeah, that's what I think at the end of the day, when, I talk to my husband who's still in medicine, like in, clinic facing, in an ER, and, he struggles with burnout and he's, struggling with that to this day. And, I read him like notes from a new position that I have as like a chief medical officer of a telehealth company. And I read him emails that the founders send me about random decisions that they're making. And he's like, wow, like they value you. And I'm like, yeah, my expertise is being valued. Again, it doesn't have anything to do with like all this time off or anything. Like, I want to show up to work when I'm valued. And that is just being an employer 101. If you don't value your staff, if there's high turnover, something is not right with your practice, or the establishment, right? Because then you're not retaining the team that needs to take care of patients. And our practice had a really hard time with retainment. A lot of clinicians were leaving. And I kept telling them, I'm like, it's because of all this, everybody. Like, you're not understanding that it's a very toxic environment. Like, there's no understanding of like the difficulties of having to manage a complicated EHR system and having to see 40 patients while we do it. Like, block our schedule. Let us have a little breathing room. But at the end, it was all about bottom line. And so when you see that, and then when you finally get out of that, is when you realize, I don't want that. Like, and I'm grateful that I was able to pivot, but it took a lot of work to get to that point, to find a understanding of like saying, okay, this isn't for me at all. Like, I want completely out, and I want to take a chance on something new.
Do you think, Dr. Mona, that you had a shift? I'm making a reach here. I don't know. I'll have to see what you say. When you became a parent, and I know that you had a pretty tumultuous postpartum experience. You had a NICU stay. I know that shifted the mindset as a woman, as a human, did it shift the mindset as a physician of like, these things are now important and
Yeah.
this is now what I want? Like, walk me through what that transition was like and how it affected you in your practice.
It is not a reach. It is absolutely true. So after Ryan, my son, was born, that was a traumatic delivery. And then I went through IVF with my daughter to have her. And then I had post-traumatic experience after having her. I mean, my journey, I have a tattoo now that reflects the entire
It's
journey.
beautiful.
Yeah, my tattoo, it was a very hard time. And so interesting because before I became a mom and before I delivered, my mentality was like I'm going to want to go back to work. Like I'm going to want to go back. Like why would I want to stay away? Like 12 weeks is enough. And then I had my son. I was in a lot of pain postpartum, physically, emotionally. And when it came time to finally go back, I didn't want to go back. And that was very telling for me because I used to be that person that was like, I want to go back right away. But what I didn't want to go back to was the lack of flexibility. And that is what I think I've always wanted. And I think so many mothers crave that. What I mean by that is what I just told you that I do for my staff, right? Like I want a job that I feel supported and I feel like I can do my talent, but also that if SHIT hits the fan, or if my kid needs me because there's an event at school, they're sick, that I can move things around easily. And you can't do that a lot of the times in medicine, right? I mean, I think about my surgeon colleagues, I think about OBs, pediatricians. If I had tried to get things blocked on my schedule, like, hey, I have to make it to an appointment. And I was met with, okay, well, if you keep missing, you're going to have to cut your schedule versus, hey, you know what? Take the time. I ended up cutting my schedule, talking to my husband and cutting hours and then cutting salary, and it worked out for the better. But it really should be more of like, what can we do to support you? And that obviously that we can come up with a compromise here. And that changed a lot because I also, from a child development perspective, when those kids were in front of me, and especially as they became toddlers, I know this, but I also saw how important it is to show up, right, for our kids in small ways whenever we can. And so being able to do that is the ultimate privilege. I tell my husband every day, it's not about the money. Like people will say that all the time, but it's about the fact that I'm able to do what I love, provide for my family, but have the flexibility of time. I think the flexibility of time is one of the most richest things that we can have. It's more valuable to me than money. Like flexibility of time with financial security is like the dream, which so many people can't get, and especially moms. And I have reached that point as of today, and it makes me feel so at peace. But obviously it took so much time to get here. But that is what I feel like every person wants. Like it makes sense. Like you just want to be able to do what you love and make money and provide for your family, but also know that if I needed to take care of myself, my kids, my husband, or some other need, that my employer or that my team would understand and let me step away so that I can focus on those other aspects of my life. Because that's what life is about. It can't just be all work or all family. It's all together. It's sustainability, you know?
This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Hand to Hold is here to support your NICU in two ways. One, you can refer your NICU parents to us for support, or two, you can bring dedicated Hand to Hold support to your NICU, either in person or virtually. Our support consists of one-to-one group and educational resources, including our family-focused podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support. For more information, visit handtohold.org and click on NICU Professionals.
Yeah, I think a lot of women, and I don't think that this is unique to medicine, but I do think that there's a point of discussion there that this, and I hate to use the word balance because I think it's a misnomer. I don't think you can, but
I think so too.
The integration of career, the integration of family, and then the integration of just the things that you enjoy doing outside of both of those things tends to be, I think, the biggest struggle, particularly for women. Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Mona, as you were thinking about, okay, I love medicine, I love my family, and I love these things, social media, I love these things outside of all that. How do you figure out which things get your time and which things can, I don't want to say suffer, but which things sort of move down the priority list? How do you decide which one gets in which order and kind of work through all of that?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that answer is going to be so personalized based on what resources we have. And what I mean by resources, it's going to be what money you have and also what support systems you have, right? Those are the two things that I think we don't realize, especially for any of my women in medicine who are also mothers, right? And so I say this because for 3 years of my motherhood with my son, we had very sporadic, inconsistent help, and we felt it. Like my husband and I reflect back on those 3 years, it took a toll on our marriage. It took a toll on our parenting. It took a toll on our individual mental health. And now that we have a nanny who's very accountable, who's very amazing, like the best person I could have ever asked for. And I believe that I kind of deserved her, meaning after all this stuff that we've been through, she showed up in our life at the time that I needed that peace and that structure. And I believe that timing was perfect. But I want to start by saying that because my answer may be very different than everybody else's, right? And I recognize that as someone who didn't always have the help. But going back to that work-life balance, I don't like the term either. I think it sets up a false choice. It implies that work and life are two competing forces. Like work is the bad part and life is the good part. It like that shows severance. It kind of makes it seem like you can go to work, leave everything at work, go to, be in your home, leave everything at home, when we know that everything's interconnected. If something's happening at home, you're going to bring it to work. If something's happening at work, you're going to bring it to home. And so I don't like it. I kind of like to use that word that I used already, which is whole life sustainability. And so the question isn't, is this balance? The question is this sustainable for the life I'm living in right now? And it goes back to what I started with this answer, right? That when 3 years ago, or when my son, let's say when my son was 2.5 and I was going through IVF and I was going through having a toddler in the house, potty training him, a husband who was working so much in the pandemic.
Which, let's be honest, potty training a toddler is a full-time job.
I hate potty training. My youngest is finally potty trained, and I'm like, thank God.
It feels good to have a pediatrician say that.
This again. I hate potty training. Like I don't know what it is. I think it's because I'm also a control freak that like you can't control it, and you're just like, oh my God, another accident. But you have to play cool. But anyways, like that is my kryptonite. Potty training. Yes. It's my pediatrician kryptonite. I do it, and we did it great. But this the sustainability. So when you ask, like, how do I know what needs me? I first have to look at what season am I in right now? So right now I'm in a very good season. I have help. I'm in good health myself, right? And those are the two things that I think are really valuable for our life, right? So I'm able to do way more. I'm able to say, okay, I can do my job. I can go away on this event. I can be amazingly present mommy. But when my son was 2.5 and I was going through IVF, I was still working at a job that gave me burnout and we had no help. I had to tell myself, what are the most important things right now to survive and sustain in the season that I'm in? And at that point, it meant taking care of my son, right? Because obviously I wanted to be a mom to him, taking care of my mental health. And that could mean working out, starting to see therapy or starting to see a therapist, which I tried to prioritize. Not nearly as much as I'm able to do now, but I wanted to start to do that. But also having a lot of self-compassion and saying, this may not be the version of myself that I like in this season, or I may really want my career to be better right now, or I really want my presence with my children to be better right now. But at this moment, I'm not able to be everything for everyone. And having some self-compassion to say, that doesn't mean that this is forever. Like, what do I need to feel supported? Maybe we will find a nanny. Maybe I will get grandma to come help us. Maybe I'll get those few hours. So it's recognizing the season you're in, having self-compassion, and then figuring out what is your way out. Because we can't just, like how I teach with my parents, you can't just validate your feelings all the time. You have to validate and figure out how you're going to get out of that situation. And I talk about this so much with children, right? Okay, you're sad, you're upset. But the key also, as they get older especially, and we need to know this, is if you don't like this feeling, what are we going to do about it? What can we do with the resources and money and time that we have so that this feeling isn't forever, that we can get to a better season? And I live my life like that. And and my followers know that I have had a very tough first 5 years of my son's life. I mean, we went through a lot of stuff, like a lot, like health issues. I mean, so many things. And I can finally say that at the first time in my life of being a mom, that I'm the happiest I've been as a mother. And I was a cranky mom. I was an irritable mom. I went through anger, all of that. But I had that mindset all the time. What is sustainable for the now? And how am I going to make it where I can reach that point that I feel that sustainability, not that balance, right? It's not work-life balance. It's whole life sustainability that I just think is so key to look at.
I am now going to start calling it that. I love that. Well, I'm
Yeah.
also glad that you mentioned seasons because I think sometimes, and now that, so we have 6 kids, our oldest is almost 25, our youngest is 11, that my season of life that it was 10 years ago when, we were freshly out of the
Yeah.
NICU versus now, vastly different. So things that were supportive back then, I no longer need because now I know what I need to put into place to get past that. And we sometimes make a decision on a season, forgetting that we're going to grow in wisdom and also
Hmm.
experience, and it's going to change. But I'm really grateful that you mentioned that we always ask our kids when they hit a road bump, we always say, "Oh, that's really hard." Validation. What are you going to do about that?
Right.
So
Especially as they get older. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because I think, particularly when we think about women in medicine, that sounds really hard. Now, what are you going to do about that? Like, you can't just stay in the hard. You got to figure out, what are we going to do? What are the support
Yeah.
systems? So, speaking of support systems, and I know we touched on this at the very beginning with your mentor, what are some things, Dr. Mona, that you have found to be helpful when you're looking for mentors? And then, being a mentor, what are some things that you try to do for the people that look to you for advice?
Yeah. Having a good mentor, like you said at the beginning, is so vital. And so for me, when I was looking for mentors, my niche is very unique in that I was always looking for someone in my space. What I mean by that, someone in healthcare that has prior education of some kind, not an influencer that has not healthcare like education, right? Because although they may have their own skill set, I wanted to find someone who's kind of doing what I'm doing in that they are a health professional, a woman, maybe a mom, awesome, that are writing books, that are, maybe have a podcast. And that is who I wanted to surround myself with, and that's the mentors I look for. And so those people also, I'm a very vibey person. Like I know people say that they probably feel the same way about themselves, but like I can meet you and know if you're a decent human being very fast, and I'm always right. Like ever since I was a kid. Like I'm to the point where I remember in junior high, a new girl came into our group and I did not like her. And I was like, something doesn't sit right. Like I don't like her. And all of them were like, you're being so mean. And I'm like, something's not right. And lo and behold, within 2 years, this little girl was like, had a lot of things that she needed to work on, and she caused a lot of rift in the friendships and stuff. So I would like to say that I pride myself on being a good judge of character. But when I meet these mentors, what I want from them is someone who is honest, transparent, and is truly wanting to uplift. And I say that because there's so many people who say that, women uplifting women and blah, 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 but they're not actually girls, because when they start to see you do better than them, that's when they retreat.
You're
And
just mean
that's
girls
not,
with lipstick.
they're exactly. And I don't want that. And I'm so good at seeing those girls because I was bullied by those girls in junior high. And so I think that's what has caused me to understand, like, I don't know. I mean, I'll give you a little bit of a chance, but like my mentors right now are those true supporters. And I don't even like saying girls, because I think that already is like, you just have to support them because they're a woman. No, you don't have to support me just because we're both females. I want you to support me because you believe that you believe in what I'm doing, and I would do the same for you. And I don't want anyone who has an evil eye for me on my side. Meaning, I'm going to go to someone that is trying to elevate themselves and always understands that there's a lot of seats at the table for all of us. And that is what I do as a mentor myself. I know that, and I do this a lot with, in my space for social media. Like I talk with so many of my peers who are on social media about brand negotiations. And I could easily be like, oh, well, if they're going to take you, they're not going to take me. But I know there's so much opportunity out there. And if one of us succeeds, we all succeed as a pediatrician, as a mom. And I know that. And I am the first, like all my friends who are online know that I will always be there to be transparent about how much I get paid. I don't make it public record, but we chat about this, how much I get paid by brands. We talk about like negotiation. I talk about like, here, I think you're being undervalued right now. And we need that. We need that transparency in order to truly uplift. And we also need that person to be truly on our team. And so if you have a mentor that you believe is so good at what they do, but they're kind of mean and they kind of tell you like, you can't do this or you're not able to do this, like you got to check and say, are they truly an uplifting realist? And that's a term that I've used a lot of, like this person that is uplifting, but also says it how it is, right? You can't just be like, yeah, you can write any book, like go. Yes, write a book, but I need you to know that the proposal process is very difficult, that
Yes,
I
it
wrote
is.
it while I'm, this, and I want people to just like tell me those things. So the two mentors that come to mind right now are both physicians that are women, also mothers, who are writing books, because right now what I need is a book mentor, because it's such a new space for me as I write my book. And these are the two women that have helped me so much in figuring out my value for a book advance. Like, what am I doing with an agent? And maybe I'll pivot into another area and I'll find a different mentor, but those women will always have my back and I will always have theirs. They're on my podcast. I support their endeavors, because I know that there's a mutual respect and a mutual desire for each other to succeed, and not this sort of, well, now you've surpassed me and now I don't want to help you. I see just way too much of that mean girl mentality, and I don't want to do that. I want true support, which sadly doesn't always exist with women in medicine.
Well, just like in relationships, it's important that if you see a yellow flag or a red flag that you're like, I don't think this is working out, so we're going to move
Yeah,
on. I think the same in mentorship, that sometimes as you move into a new season, maybe a mentor that was really serving you and you had a great relationship and it was working well, maybe they no longer have some of the things and ways in which you want to grow. And so you're like, maybe it's now time to find a new mentor, or we're just
right.
not connecting. It's okay to do that. But I think I will say, while I don't play medicine. I just sort of know enough about it to be dangerous. But I can tell you that there are so many women and men too that are sort of in this space that have been great mentors, because they really do, like you said, they believe in me. When someone believes in you and wants the best for you, you can feel it, and it makes you a better whatever you are, physician, NICU professional, podcast, or whatever, because you feel seen, known, and loved, and
Yeah,
they want that for you. So I think it's really important that we seek out good mentors, not because someone says, "Oh, this person's really good," but no, they're really good for me.
yeah.
I think that connection has to be there. Is there anything that you would go back, like if you could go back, whether it's to medical school or to residency, if you could go back and say, if only I had learned this, or I wish I had had this experience, I think it would have been incredibly beneficial. What would you say?
I think there was so much doubt that I had about my abilities, in residency. And what I mean by that is, like, when I was looking for a job out of residency, right? I didn't know my value enough. And I do believe that the system can have a play in that, like how residency selections are made, how we search for jobs, the emphasis on, you know, scores versus overall candidate. Like, I think that we're almost groomed for that mentality of like, no, you got to be the best and you got to do this. And if I had just told myself and said, hey, you are a really compassionate human being. Like, you care so deeply about children and you care so deeply about your work. Don't undervalue yourself. I think I would have been happier, right? I think I would have asked for more, maybe like negotiated better at jobs. I think I would have said no to jobs that, not like interview at jobs that I felt like weren't good for me, but just take the interview because I wanted something. I would have held out longer for things that made sense for me. And I think I'm
Mhm.
doing that a lot more now than I did when I was fresh out of residency. And I think it took a lot of things for me to get there. It took paying off my loans helped because you don't have that over your head, but just took a lot of self-confidence. It took a lot of, again, that self-love, self-compassion. And it also took just a lot of humility to understand, like, you don't have to be amazing at everything. You're not going to get everything you want, but just practice good medicine, have integrity. You're a good person. And as long as you do that, you're going to keep reaching the goals that you want to set for yourself. And so I wish I could have just told little Mona, not that little Mona, but like 20-year-old, 25-year-old Mona, all these things. Because I think I held so much of like, well, okay, well, I have to take this and I don't want this. And, I can't ask for this. And I was just so afraid to advocate for self in the medical system and advocate, whether it's negotiations or whether it's schedules or anything like that. And through this process, I would say, ask. The worst thing that happens is that they say no, but you got to ask and you got to search and you have to have reasonable expectations to know the climate that you're in the workplace, but don't settle for anything that, you don't think that's serving you, and understand that you're valuable. I think that's the biggest thing.
I'm glad that you said advocacy, because I mean, certainly we've learned how to do it with a NICU baby, but sometimes we forget to do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
We forget our self-worth. We forget that we do have good experience. We do have good ideas. And, within limits, you can't roll in as a 25-year-old and be like, I know everything. But
Right. Right.
it's important to say, hey, this is what I need, and then to not devalue what it is that you bring to the table. I'm so glad that you said that. So if you could build like a curriculum for NICU professionals, whether it's in medical school or nursing school, like if you think, oh, this is a hole, and we need to fill this hole. Like, what would be the biggest hole that you would fill if you could do that?
Like for people who are in training or already in the NICU, like practicing.
Ooh, why don't we do both? Let's start with
Yeah.
training and then in the NICU.
I think for training, I would open to understanding what options are there after the training, right? Like I think what happened in residency, like I said about I didn't get any social media education. I think every few years there needs to be a landscape discussion on the future of our profession, right? Like where is our profession going? So many medical students, so many people don't get that conversation and then they burn out faster because expectations don't match reality, right? Like people
good.
think that their attending ER doctor is happy because they're sitting and watching, but like, are we really talking about the burnout? Are we really talking about the shift schedule work and what that does to your circadian rhythm? Like, I think we glorify medicine too much, that think that it's going to be this beautiful, amazing thing, and then we're largely disappointed because of that mismatch, right? Rather than being like, okay, why don't we actually say, hey, hours are tough at the beginning, like you have to work X amount of hours. Here are some options that you can do. You can be travel nurse, you can work at a hospital, maybe as a doctor you can do this, you can do part-time, and here's what you can think about. So I think we should talk about that. I think we should do a better job on educating about loans. I always say that because all this is tied into the financial shackles that a lot of us feel because of the amount of debt we have, that we have to just keep chugging along at a job that is not healthy for us because we got to pay off debt. And that is, I believe, and my husband believes, by design. You know, they make you take out this debt, they don't pay you a lot in residency, and then they groom you into thinking, okay, well, now you got to just serve the system. But then you burn out because you're basically working to pay off a debt. And that is not what we wanted. That's why we worked so hard to pay off our debt very fast. So financial education, I want to give a landscape to the rising, future generation of like what our profession looks like. And then for people out there, I think it's always these conversations about sustainability. You know, I would add this to the curriculum. Like, hey, now that you're in a profession, have you reflected on what you're feeling? Have you reflected on, do you like what's happening in your role or do you want more? What more do you want? Do you want to work in like an admin role? Do you want to be like working in the community? What is going to make you feel like you're living a life of purpose? To me, living a life of purpose is one of the most important things that we can do. And for me, living a life of purpose is being able to have a positive impact on other human beings. Like that is what makes me feel like I've done a good job in this life. Whether it's for my children, whether it's for my patients, I know that I'm leading a good life because I've changed someone's life for the better. And when I die, whenever that is, I will know that I led a very good life because I did that with my full heart. And so I want people to reflect on, is this working for you now? Is this sustainable? Whether you're out for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what are other opportunities that you can do, right? Like we need to open up and educate each other about the medical system outside of just medicine. Like, what can we do? Is there a role that you can do, an administrative role? Like that way we don't feel like we're tied down to things. And then maybe, just maybe you'll find something that you're really good at, which for me was videos. I have always loved creating like little skits and videos. And I have found my calling getting to do that while simultaneously practicing medicine, but I would have never known had I not tried. Or maybe we can just help people figure out what the options are out there so that they can make better decisions for themselves.
Well, as an aside, speaking of videos, you and I are both fans of The Pit.
Yeah,
I'm seriously addicted to that show. It's only because I'm a big Noah Wiley fan from the
I love
ER
it.
days, but I do love that you have the ability to take something contemporary, it's something that people are seeing every day as it relates to medicine, and then sharing that from a perspective of a pediatrician and saying like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is why this is important. And these are ways in which we can change, or I think it's great. So
Oh,
I'm
thank
giving
you.
you kudos for the video because I do love that.
Thank
Um,
you.
you're welcome. So you alluded to it earlier, but the decision making and the discernment process when you talked about when you were hitting burnout and you're like, okay, these are some things that I need to do. How, and this is specifically to you, how did you decide, okay, I know that there needs to be a change. And then how did you go through figuring out what that change looked like for you? Because I think there's a lot of people listening that I think we all go through periods where like, okay, now we don't live one continuous life, that we live this life and we make it ebbs and flows. We hit changes or opportunities for growth. And we often struggle with the choice of what to do. How did
Mhm.
you determine, okay, this new role that you have with this telehealth company, this is what's next for me? Because I think there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out, how can I choose well so that I can find that peace and get rid of that burnout?
Interestingly, it took having to go through the tough times to understand what values and what things meant the most to me. And what really helped was doing a gratitude exercise. So I think if you've seen on my social, starting in 2023, I started doing a gratitude jar. So I would every time I felt grateful for something, I would write it on a slip of paper with the date, put it in my jar. And at the end of every year, I would read all of the slips, and then I would write a summary of what are the key
That's
things that
good.
keep coming up. What are the key things that just keep coming up in my gratitude jar? And through the years, I started to see a pattern. And the pattern was this: being able to spend time with my kids, having time flexibility, and being able to take a nap. I'm not even lying. Like
Be honest. Yeah,
the amount of times I had being able to take a nap, and that just goes into the time flexibility, right?
sure.
And so then I knew that, okay, my key here is finding a way to continue to practice medicine where I can still have my practice, but also be able to have time flexibility and be able to spend time with my kids. And so that is how I figured out what was for me. And so maybe for you, it's sitting down and thinking what makes you feel happy. Like, what element or what situation do you feel like you thrive or that you are most at peace in, and figuring out, okay, it's when I'm able to do this. Maybe I want to start a side hustle where I, make cupcakes and sell them. Like, you have to think about what it is that brings you purpose and joy. And that takes a lot of introspection, like there has to be something that brings you a lot of joy. And for many, it could just be your job. And that's awesome, right? Like if you're working and you love it, awesome. But that's what I did. And when I started to notice what I wanted, what I started to do is I just started to continue to keep working. And what I mean by that is, I would work clinically. I would keep working for peds-doctalk, keep attracting that sort of energy and working hard at the same time. There's a lot of people who poo-poo manifestation. And I think that people just have a misunderstanding of what manifestation is. Manifestation isn't that you just say, oh, pretty please, I hope this happens to me. It's reasonable will that I can do this, but I'm also going to put in the hard work. So it's 100% hope and 100% hard work. And that is what manifestation is. It's not like, well, I want to become the president tomorrow. It's like, no, like, let's keep it reasonable. And also, can we do sustainable things? Again, that whole sustainability to make those goals happen. And so that is what this is, right? And that's what I set my goals on like 3-4 years ago. Like, okay, I don't know what it is at that point, right? I don't know what it is, but I know that I want to be able to have time flexibility, that I want to be able to spend time with my kids. And I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And anytime I see an opportunity or I think of something and it aligns with me, I will say, hey, this seems like something I'd want to explore. And through that sort of energy is how the right doors opened in my life. And my husband sees it, and he doesn't believe in manifestation nearly as much as I do. But I want to be clear that if you put the hard work in and you also understand that things are possible within limit, obviously you're like, for your expertise, that things
Sure.
are very possible. But you have to first know, what is it that you want in life? Like, what is it? Do you want flexibility? Do you want to work full-time, part-time? Do you want to like be able to sit on the couch at 3 p.m. like, but still go to work when you want? Like, what is it that you want? And then your goal, your mind, and your entire goal set is to make that try to make that happen with hard work and determination.
Well, I really appreciate the data-driven gratitude jar in the sense that you're like, okay, sometimes I think we make emotional decisions and then maybe
Yeah.
we look back later and we're like, ah, shouldn't have done that. But when you have those things written down, whether it's a jar, something that you write in, whatever, and then you can look at those over a period of time. You're able to see a pattern, like you said, and then you're like, okay, so this is maybe let's try this path and let's go down this and let's see what happens. But I think it's good. It's actually a really beautiful way of saying data is important, and then how do we take that data and how do we do something with it? That's really I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
mean, and with the gratitude exercise I do, it kind of mixes the jar of gratitude is so healthy. I mean,
I agree.
and I had a therapist on my podcast, and he was talking about the hardest point of gratitude is being able to find gratitude when you have nothing to be grateful for. That is the key, to be able to teach your brain that even in the hardest of times, I'm not dismissing the hard, but I'm still able to find something
Yes.
good. And that is what I encourage listeners to do. And it's so hard when your brain and all of our brains are programmed for threat, for negativity. It like feeds the negative dopamine pathway, but you can also control it and say, Yes, awesome. And I give the example, it was so cold in Florida. One of the simplest thing I put in my jar was when the weather warmed up and I was able to work out outside, or being able to snuggle with my kids when it was so cold, or having a working heater. I wrote that. And people would be like, well, duh, you should have a working heater. You're a doctor. I'm like, no, I'm so grateful that I have a working heater, because I also know so many people don't have working heaters. And that is just such a healthy thing. And then putting that in the book, writing the summary after you read everything of what you were grateful for. And then I also just write a future letter to self for the next year. So like when I did it at the end of last year, I wrote a letter to 2026 Mona, and almost a manifestation exercise. Like, where you think you're going to be? And I write it like it's going to happen. And then I read it every year, and I'm going to be honest, it always happens. And it's just because, like, again, this combo of hard work, reasonable expectation, and making sure that you know what you want, because it sounds frou-frou. And I hate that people who understand it because they know it's happening to them. But when you clean up all the clutter in your universe and your mind, bad energy, the people who don't support you, the people who are not, like, all that bad energy, the world is going to give you good energy. Like, if you put good energy out, good energy is going to come to you. It doesn't mean that you're not going to go through hard times, but it just means that you are going to attract good because you're giving good. And so this whole gratitude is like cyclical. It snowballs, right? And that's why I'm like such a fan of it, because it gives us so much information about ourselves so that we can make better decisions for ourselves.
You're like your own mentor. I love that.
I am my own mentor. I'm my husband's mentor. And then I love it because I love being a mom, because I get to impart this to my son, and I get to see his eyes sparkle when we talk about this, and I didn't get a lot of this. My husband definitely did not get this, and he has a harder time doing what I'm describing. And now he's finally getting it after me telling him for years, like, all of this stuff. He'll say, like, Mona, I started this exercise where I like look at the glimmers. I'm like, I've been telling you that for like 3 years. It's called gratitude.
You're like, thanks for jumping on board, honey.
Yeah. But he's like, no, my therapist said, like, it's more. I'm like, okay, I love your therapist, but that's literally what I told you a few years ago, but that's great.
And you're like, and I'm free. But
yeah, I know. I'm like, but I'm happy you're getting it. Right. And so it really is something that, like, just my goal in life is for people to not live a life where they look back with regret and say, what did I just spend my life doing? Like, that's not what I want. And I always say this, that when you die, your job is going to fill your spot right away. Like, they're not going to have they're not going to cry. They're not going to do anything. The only people that are going to be sad are your family members, the people's lives you impacted truly. And so don't put so much energy into a job that won't grieve you when you leave. And I felt that experience when I left my clinical job. And that's how I knew that I was leaving the right place, and that I was like, okay, I've been working 8 years here. There was no goodbye. There was nothing. And it was like, that shows me everything I needed to hear, that it's time to part ways. And I am grateful for what I learned. I wish everyone well, but it's time to move on.
Yeah, it's a new season. I want to end with this, because you mentioned that this connection part, not just with your own goals and your own desires, but also with the people that you work with, whether they're mentors or even your patients, but also the integration of motherhood and womanhood helps you be a better physician. So, Dr. Mona, as you're thinking about, like, last parting advice to someone, certainly as they're in the NICU, how do you think that your personal life has sort of informed how you show up for people as a physician?
It's so important to really take all of that in with a lot of humility and accept it and want to be better for yourself. And so, absolutely, for me, I have always been a compassionate clinician, but I've become a way better listener, like way better. Like, and a lot of it's because of my own experiences not being listened to, and being dismissed about the feelings that I was having in my own body, and experiencing medical gaslighting, that I now am way more in tune that there's a human in front of me, right? There's a human in front of me that's telling me something. I'm going to do everything in reason to figure out what we can do for that patient. Yes, I know in like clinical medicine, there's sometimes people who malinger, or there's sometimes people who, truly it could be a psychological thing, but we can't say that until we've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and supported that patient through the physical journey of what we may need to figure out, And so I would say that is what really has changed me. I feel like I'm way more compassionate. I feel like I listen way more. And that has not only helped me in my professional life, it helps me in my personal life too, right? Like, I listen more to my husband, to my friends, to my children. And so my advice is what we just mentioned a lot already, but remember that we don't exist in silos, right? We don't exist that this is work Mona and this is Dr. Mona and then this is mommy Mona, wife Mona. Everything is interconnected. And when everything is interconnected, you have to think not about work-life balance. You have to think, what do I need to have whole life sustainability? I mean, this term is something that I just feel needs to be said more. I haven't heard it yet, so it is something that I've created, I feel, unless I'm wrong, someone can correct me. But I don't have a trademark, so that's fine. But like, it just is something that embodies to me what life is about, right? Like, what am I going to do to make it what I want it to be? And we are in charge of our life, right? So like, we got to make the most of it. We got to figure out, again, how am I going to get through a hard time, grieve what I need to grieve, take the time that I need to grieve, validate, and find my way out, right? It's how I parent. It's how I think I want anyone who comes to me as a mentor, how I'd mentor them, of like, let's feel the feelings, but then also let's move. Like, let's figure out how we're going to move to the next step. And through that, like you said beautifully earlier, there's so much resiliency that comes through the struggle. I know this, I've been through it. And I know when someone goes through something hard, when I look at it, I have this almost smile on my face because I know that if they can come out of this on the other end, which they will, the person that they'll become, the butterfly that they'll become after the caterpillar had to struggle is just such a beautiful thing that I've experienced, although it was very hard. And so that is what I would say.
I had a friend tell me the other day, he said, Kathryn, don't ever forget that every garden needs a gardener.
Yes.
You can only automate so many things, but there has to be pruning in order for the garden to flourish. And I thought that was good advice. As always, thank you for encouraging women who are in the medical profession, but also just physicians and doctors and NICU professionals in general, that we all need a champion, and it's okay to ask for that champion and also to be that champion for yourself. So I'm so grateful for the conversation.
Thank you. As always, such a great conversation. I hope it resonates with so many. And thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all, so much for listening. That was a fantastic conversation. I hope that you'll do me a favor. If you love today's episode, please share it with a friend. You can also review over on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can also give us a listen and a watch over on YouTube. It's how we reach more NICU professionals. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Reckitt Mead Johnson, whose mission is to nourish the world's children for the best start in life. For more than a century, they have led the way in developing safe, high-quality, innovative nutrition products and continue to push the boundaries of nutritional knowledge with consistent, strong investments in scientific exploration.